Around 1 month ago, I decided to do an experiment in one of my fish tanks. The tank was home to 5 ember tetras and a beautiful golden ram. So out they came and went into a storage tank. First of all, I put down a base layer of pond compost. Yes, that's right, pond compost. In my head, I'm thinking, pond plants grow amazing, I can't see why aquatic ones won't either. I then capped the top off with a load of sand, just to make sure that all the nutrients were locked into that layer. I then went through various different layouts, trying different things with fossilized wood stone and also structural wood. And eventually I hit the jackpot in something I liked. I then glued the whole thing together using cyanoacrylate glue and baking soda or bicarb soda, and then planted the whole tank. I used just standard epiphyte plants on the wood and the stones. Lots and lots of Anubias in this one and a nice big Java fern at the top for a focal point. I then prepared a lot more plants and planted them into the new substrate system using the compost. I actually chose quite a lot of high demanding plants for this setup just to really test it out. Plants like Rotala hri and HC Cuba are usually more advanced plants, so I'm really interested to see how it gets on because we're not even using expensive lighting, it's just all budget, the whole thing. It was then time to try and catch our fish out of their storage tank, which was actually quite difficult. I had to tear it apart, but it was worth it. And after some water testing to make sure everything was okay, in went the fish. And the final result was pretty good, but I was so looking forward to seeing how this would turn out at a later date. And here is how the tank is now looking after 1 month. The plants have gone absolutely nuts, I couldn't be more pleased. The thing that I'm most impressed with is how popping the reds are, but not just the colour of the plants, the overall health as well. There's not a pin spot or a bad leaf in sight. So the tank is looking absolutely insane. I'm loving the growth so far. It's crazy, isn't it? It's just a budget light, but that soil, that dirt, that aqua soil they call it, even though it's not aqua soil like we would use, it's pond compost. It's compost. But yeah, obviously it grows the pond plant so well. I always thought it would do well in the aquarium, and it really is. Now we've got a bit of background levels of algae, but I'm absolutely fine with those, or algae. It's mainly a little bit of dust algae, that kind of thing. There was a little bit of thread algae as well, but you know, I've only got a few amanos in here, so they will take care of it eventually, but we could just remove that manually. But these plants have just gone absolutely nuts, haven't they? Now I've got that problem again where I really don't want to trim them because they're looking so good. Especially the Rotala macrandra we've got in the foreground here. It needs to be trimmed because look, it's covering everything up, but I just so don't want to do it because it looks amazing, doesn't it? Now it's not quite as vibrant and pink as you'd normally see in like a high-tech scape. That is because this light obviously is really sort of budget. It's not packing out loads. I did double up the lighting at one point, but it was too much for such a sort of low tech or, you know, no CO2 tank because I've got even more algae going on all the glass. So I cut back to the one because the balance was really right. Sometimes it's okay to try things and then switch back again though. So what I'm looking to do today is clean up the scape a bit and do a big trim up. Now I don't want to trim everywhere though. So at the moment, the Rotala hri here in the centre is looking in its prime. It's looking so good, but we still need to hack that one back. I'm going to replant the trimmings probably elsewhere in the tank. The Rotala macrandra definitely needs a trim up. Look at it, it's nearly touching the surface. As gorgeous as it looks, and it's going to pain me to do it. I'm going to have to trim it right down at the base. This plant's quite big, so I don't think I'm going to replant the stems in this tank. I'm going to put them in a different one. Now the Ludwigia is starting to grow at the top of the tank, which I think gives it an awesome look. So what I'm going to do is completely leave it. I'm just going to let it try and grow at the top and just have this great big immersed section right at the top of the aquarium. The HC Cuba and Monte Carlo is now settled and converted right in. It's starting to look really good. We don't need to do anything to that apart from maybe just fluff it up with our hands a little bit and waft out any detritus that's caught in amongst it. The S. repens is growing really well. You can see all the new growth on the top of the plants, and it's the same story moving further up. Loads of new growth. Again, it's quite a slow grower, so I don't think it needs any trimming up this time. First thing you want to do is scrape down the sides of the aquarium. You can either use like a pad to clean it, but I just like to use a razor blade. It's nice and quick, and I know I'm getting everything off. Now this is probably one of the most therapeutic parts of any sort of maintenance on an aquarium. I think that's partly because it's the one that takes the least amount of effort, but very quickly your aquarium looks really good again, provided you've got good plants, of course. And why wouldn't you have good plants? You should be following all the tips so far, and your plants should be great even without spending a ton of money. Now some people like to switch off their filters when they're doing maintenance. I don't do that. I tend to just keep them running the whole time. This is unless I've got an absolute ton of mess floating around in the water column, which isn't usually the case. Most of the time it's just a little bit of algae that's floating. Now algae needs light to survive, so if it goes into your filter it's not really going to hurt because it'll just die off. There's no light in your filter, is there? I just find keeping the filter on keeps that flow going around, and it helps to transport any waste out of the aquarium. I mean, we're going to be doing a water change anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. But for me, keep scraping, keep that water flow going, and it just speeds up the whole process, I think. Next up, take a soft brush. I like to use a toothbrush because why not? It just does the job. It's not fancy and it's cheap. Now this is really good for getting in those tight spots, so in the corners of the tank. Also it's good for brushing down any hardscape as well. Now I've done that, it's time to start on the trimming. So now that all the surfaces are clean, it's time to start with the trimming of these plants. First up, we're tackling the Rotala macrandra, purely because it's blocking the view of everything else. It kills me to do this because it's growing so well and looking so beautiful. But now that I'm getting better at growing plants, now I'm getting better all the time, believe it or not, different methods, you know, like experimenting with compost in this build, for instance. I'm just getting better and better at growing these plants, so I'm getting less worried about trimming them back. So I'm going to take these plants right down low. Now normally I replant stems, but this tank is so full already, I just want more dense growth in the area rather than more coverage. So now that I've trimmed all the stems, I'm going to put them all together and then place a weight around them. First of all, I'll cut off a little bit of filter floss just to protect the stem, and then I can push them through the gap in the weight and just put them in another tank. I've got a plant storage tank that's got a load of Neocaridina shrimp in. Normally when I put trimmers in there, they grow out really well, so I'm just going to plonk these in here and I'll use them again at a later date on some sort of awesome build. No idea what yet though. That's the beauty of having things like this on standby, like plants that you've grown out, is that you can just choose from them at any point. Thoroughly recommend that you guys get yourself a little tank to put plant trimmings in if you haven't already. Next up, we've got the Rotala HR. It looks so good, but I've got to hack it back. So if you notice, after I've trimmed it right back, the bottom area is quite green. That's because these leaves were pretty much being blocked of any light from the leaves above it. So they went nice and red, these stayed green, but in no time at all we'll get double shoots coming out of these like little green ones, and they'll all be red. Oh, it's gonna look so good in no time at all. I say no time at all, I mean comparatively. In a high-tech scape, this stuff's growing back within like a week or two. In this sort of style, it's going to take another month before it looks good again. But I'm okay with that because I'm so terrible at trimming that a month is a good amount of time between sessions for each tank. So originally I planned to scoop out all of the trimmings from the top of that HR and just throw them away because they're quite short. I still couldn't do that, so I had to collect them all up and just replanted them back in that plant storage tank with the shrimp again. I then noticed that the skimmer on the filter inlet was completely sort of, not clogged, but it was getting that way. So the easiest way to clean this off is again to use your toothbrush. It's really good at getting into those tight spots, and also a pipe cleaner I use as well. Pipe cleaner is really just for like the whole tube, but I use the toothbrush mainly going around all the top parts. It can be quite tricky and takes a little bit of time, but it is worth it. I now need to remove some of the thread algae. Now I'm quite fortunate, there's not a lot going on in this tank at all. Some tanks just go nuts with thread algae, don't they? That's usually because your lighting is too high and there's too much nutrients in the water column. So this tiny little bit we've got here on the Monte Carlo, I think that's just from a little bit of die-off from some of the plant. And then there's also a little bit on the driftwood as well. Easily fixed with just a pipe, little siphon, give it a suck, and then you can just pull it out with the water change. So for sucking out small areas or try to spot treat a certain area, I just use a normal piece of hose like you guys would and just drain it into a bucket. But then if I want to do a nice big water change, I get my proper system, which is an external pump that just I press on with my phone because it's attached to a smart plug. It sucks out the water for me while I'm stood there. I can turn it on and off. I don't have to keep going backwards or forwards. Then I just fill it up from the tap. In terms of treating the chlorine in the water, well, after it's filling up, or as it's filling up usually, I just put a little bit of water conditioner in and that sorts it all out. So that's the tank taken care of. It's looking great, but what about the fish of this tank? Well, we haven't got a huge stocking in this. This was mainly because I was doing it as an experiment with the compost, and I wasn't sure the effects it was going to have, so I didn't want to be adding a ton more waste with a load of fish. I am going to be getting more soon though. So in the tank we've got an absolutely lovely little school of Ember Tetra. I've had them for quite a while actually. I did have a bigger school, but there was a little bit of an accident with the filter inlet a while back. It basically got stuck underwater and a few fish got sucked in. A couple actually survived in the filter, but not all of them. So yeah, we've got those nice little group of embers. I do want to get some more of those, increase the school size. I'm just waiting for some to arrive at the fish shop. I'm going to grab them straight away. And also the star of the show is this absolutely gorgeous golden ram. This is probably the best looking ram I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I am biased because it's mine and I get to see him every day. He did have a female, and again, we had a little accident with that. That was one of the fish we also lost with that pipe accident I was talking about. But I've been looking for another golden ram since. I've not seen a female golden ram anywhere. Again, as soon as I see it, I'm going to buy it and put it in the tank because I really want to be able to breed these fish. It would be awesome to get some baby rams. I've never had rams get to the stage of breeding where we've got them free swimming. I've had little wigglers down on substrate, but then they got eaten by either the parents or the Ember Tetras in this tank. This was on a previous setup though. So that's the tank looking great, good maintenance session, it's looking how I want it to be. Now what about the other tanks on the sort of shelf next to it? You might remember that a few weeks back I set up the bowl, and we've got the sparkling gourami tank right at the back there. That's been set up for a long time now. That is in the zone. So here is the sparkling gourami tank. I basically don't have to do anything to this aquarium anymore at all. Oh, here's the fish. So yeah, it's not just sparkling gouramis we've got in here. We've got our guppies as well, endler guppies. There's a male there. And then there's a few females as well. Now they've given birth several times, but guess what? You guys were right. The sparkling gouramis ate all the babies, but it's all right. Oh, hello. But that's okay. You know, it's part of the sort of system we've set up here. Things like that are going to happen. But if we come down low here, look, you can really see the sort of coolness of the scape. We've got a triangular composition. We've got just normal sort of epiphyte plants in the middle with some really nice looking moss there. That's the Taiwan moss. Just trim it regularly and it grows awesome like that. It's actually due for a trim again soon now because that's getting like, it looks good now, but in no time at all those are going to be huge, aren't they? We've got the Rotala H right here, just starting to get the reds on it now, which is awesome. As it gets more height, like sort of up to about there, it'll start getting really red. We've got dwarf hairgrass down the bottom that's actually carpeting. Look, it's sending runners across and all out into the foreground, which is awesome. So every 2 weeks, I'll probably have to scrape the glass on this tank, and that is it now. Don't you just love it when your tank comes in sort of like a perfect balance and you can just sit back and enjoy it? I mean, saying that, normally when that happens, it's about time I sort of start again, but not with this one. I really like this one. I'm just gonna keep it going for as long as I can. I give it 2 more weeks. No, I'm joking. So this one was actually set up in a completely different way to the Golden Ram tank. Well, I say completely different. It didn't have the pond compost underneath. What I did was put a layer of aqua soil and gravel underneath my old usual way. And what that meant was I had to put a ton of root tabs in as well to get the nutrient level up to what is sort of sufficient for these kind of plants to be growing in such a nice way. Now, I didn't put anything in with the pond compost because it's so nutrient rich already. So it is basically a balancing act because this one didn't have enough nutrients. And I'd say I'd put a little bit too much of the compost in here and it's got a little too much nutrients because of the sort of algae problems I had at the start. Well, not the start, a couple of weeks in, it's not problems, it's just like the glass gets dust algae very fast, and that suggests that there's quite a lot of nutrients in the water column allowing it to happen, whereas obviously on this tank there isn't a lot, so it's barely any cleaning at all. And then of course we've got the bowl aquarium here. That's obviously got no filter in it at all, apart from the plants, of course. Now, I've done this before and had problems where the water's gone really sort of cloudy, but the way I set this up was with the little mesh bags of aqua soil underneath the sand, and as a result, it's looking like it's going to be an absolute flyer. Flyer? Winner? We'll go winner. no flying. So yeah guys, just take a look at this so far. It's doing insane, isn't it? Look at that. The pearl weed's getting too long already. That's been a week. That pearl weed was down right with the HC Cuba or Monte Carlo, I can't remember. A little mix of both, I think, on those bottom rocks. It's growing up. Now we don't want that to get too tall, because in amongst those, I have got right there, look, is some Belixa japonica, and that will look great in that foreground as a big fluffy plant. Now the rasboras, we've got a few, 5 or 6 I think, chili rasboras in here. They are doing brilliant. It's really hard to focus on them in a round bowl. Now some people are worried about the fish going in this tank. Honestly, they seem to absolutely love it. It's their own little zone. It's actually, look, then another one's coming forward as well. So they hide out amongst where they want to be. They got like loads of cover. They can go wherever they want. I mean, if a fish was worried about being in a space, they would not be coming up to the front glass and looking at me like this, would they? They'd be constantly hiding and we'd never see them. So I think they're absolutely happy in this bowl. It looks shallower than it is. And also I think it didn't help that I blew the fish up for size in the thumbnail, so it looked like it was a smaller space than it actually was. But you know, otherwise you couldn't even see what fish was in there, so it was kind of necessary. In terms of background plants, they're already reached the surface within this week that this has been set up. Well, a week and 3 days, something like that, because I normally finish a build before I actually publish it, so it's normally done a few days before. And that's normally because when you first sort of fill the tank up, it's a little bit cloudy and everything. But in this one, it's just been perfect from the get-go. The chili rasbora's colours, look, they're so vibrant and red, so I can tell they're happy, because you don't get colours in fish when they're not happy. For instance, when you bring them back from the shop, they're all washed out, and yeah, it just doesn't happen. But I've had these chili rasboras for quite a long time now, look, and they still remember to tap, even though we're in the new tank. Just sprinkle a little bit of food on the top. Oh, I don't think I put enough in, it's not sinking. They'll see it in a minute. There we go, they're going for it now. You can see the top sort of vibrating. There you go guys, it's in there. A little bit floating around. Scared fish do not come to the surface like this. So I was only counting 4, but there we go, there's all 6 of them. Oh, they're all going around there. Yeah, there's 6, definitely 6. I challenge it. I challenge the idea that fish can't be kept in bowls, because in my experience, it's been absolutely awesome. I've done this before with rice fish, which are actually a bigger fish than this in the same bowl, and I had the same outcome. They seemed so comfortable and content. So there we go. What an awesome looking shelf this has sort of evolved into being, and I'm really starting to feel like I'm becoming more accomplished in myself, in not just like pot luck getting tanks to look good, because these ones, I think I'm nailing it, and I really do feel great and privileged coming in every morning and taking a little look over here. Don't really know what this is, if I'm honest, but I still quite like it being there. And then this asparagus fern at the side here is one of the first plants I've managed to keep alive for a decent length of time. I'm terrible with houseplants. Like, I can keep planted tanks alive pretty well, but when it comes to houseplants, I just forget to water it. Now let's actually check that. Oh no, it is moist. I did it a few days ago, but it was completely dry.